Chicago Newsroom 2.0 is made possible by the generous financial support of the Field Foundation of Illinois and generous Chicagoans like you.
This week on Chicago Newsroom 2.0, Roundtable panelists Jeffery Beckham, Kafi Moragne-Patterson, and Sufyan Sohel are back to help unpack some of the top news stories of the past week.
Recently announced Chicago mayoral candidate Dr. Lisa Nee joins the newsroom to present her case to serve as Chicago's next chief executive.
And the Stories of Us CEO, Ashley Shaw Scott Adjaye, is here to discuss a transformational civic imagination and storytelling project designed to share lived experiences from communities across the country and right here in Chicago. I'm Dr. Suzet McKinney.
And I'm Glenn Eden. Chicago Newsroom 2.0 starts right now.
This week on the Roundtable, few issues are reshaping Chicago's political and civic landscape more dramatically than immigration and the questions surrounding power, accountability, and public trust. This week, those two themes collided in ways that demand a deeper conversation. First, new data identifies Chicago Immigration Court as one of the nation's leading drivers of a dramatic increase in removal orders, even as local families continue to navigate an increasingly aggressive federal enforcement environment. Reports of a Chicago Public Schools employee being detained while attending a scheduled immigration appointment have intensified concerns about due process, while new questions in Washington surround ICE's reported purchase of sophisticated spyware capable of covertly accessing cell phones, raising alarms about privacy, surveillance, and civil liberties. Then we turn to Chicago politics. Congressman Jesus Chuy Garcia has long been viewed as one of the city's most influential progressive voices. But his decision to personally elevate former Chief of Staff Patty Garcia as his preferred successor has sparked criticism from some longtime supporters and political observers, raising difficult questions about political succession, insider influence, and whether the move strengthens or complicates the legacy he has spent decades building. Joining me now to help unpack both of these important stories are three incredibly smart leaders: Jeffery Beckham, CEO of Chicago Scholars; Kafi Moragne-Patterson, Executive Director of the Impact Leadership Program at Chicago Urban League; and Sufyan Sohel, Chair of the Cook County Commission on Human Rights. Welcome, one and all. Boy, do we have a packed conversation today.
Thank
All
you
right.
for having us.
Yes, of course. It's always wonderful to have the three of you with us. Let's start with this immigration issue. Chicago's immigration court has reportedly become one of the nation's leading venues for removal orders. What explains this dramatic increase, and is this the primary result of new federal policy, changes in immigration law, or how cases are being processed? And I know, Sufyan, you are jumping to answer this question, so why don't we just start with you?
Yeah, thank you so much. And it's a great subject because what we're seeing is increased numbers of, at the courthouses, some of these judges have 140 people in their morning session that they are all being there to see whether or not they can legally stay in this country anymore.
Right.
We had the CPS custodian this week who is being deported. I read earlier that there's a woman from Des Plaines who's Polish background, been a green card holder for 2 decades and who's been in detention 51 weeks. Almost a year.
I read that story.
And I think what's happening is it's not an issue of policy. It's an issue of what's being enforced, what's being prioritized. So many people, there was a gentleman earlier this year, a Pakistani individual, been here 30 plus years, store owner. He was detained and then sent back to Pakistan. Like, people are choosing to come to this country. They're being intentional. They're providing service. They're paying taxes. They're raising families. And they're trying to follow all the rules, cross every T, dot every I, go to their court appointments, and then it's at these very court appointments that they're being kidnapped, basically, and then sent back to homes that aren't really even their homes anymore.
That's right.
And what that's happening is, one, people are going to be more afraid to go to their hearings, and then they're going to be violating the law because they're not going to their hearings.
Sure.
And then we're also seeing encroachment in schools, in hospitals, in public places. So this fear that people have, whether they're here without documentation or have followed every rule and crossed to the T, it's just this, do we belong even if we're doing these things right? And what does that mean?
So the fear is real. So Kafi, turning to you, if immigrants fear appearing in court, what are the broader consequences for public safety and then the integrity of the immigration system?
Absolutely. Well, I just want to plus one everything that Sufyan said, and I appreciate the ways that you talked about the diversity of the population, which I think often gets lost. To your point, I think Haitian immigrants are being targeted right now. Like 300,000 have just lost their temporary protected status. There is a crazy increase for Nigerian and Jamaican ones as well. So that fear is real, and it trickles down in important ways. It trickles down to, I mean, this is they're asking people to voluntarily show up.
Right.
So if there is no trust in that voluntary process, that trickles down to schools, to transportation. It's endless. So it is important to sort of get a hold of it. Yeah.
Jeffrey, let me turn to you. There's a recent CBS News report discussing Senator Gary Peters and the fact that he is demanding answers after reports that ICE purchased this sophisticated spyware that's capable of covertly accessing smartphone data and information. Where should the line be drawn between legitimate law enforcement tools and government surveillance that threatens civil liberties?
Well, I think we're so far past that line at this point that it's hard to roll it back and establish where it should land. I mean, think about this. You're using a phone to do everything these days, from paying our bills to tracking our children and making sure that things are happening in our homes, that we work with them. And now there's a software tool, and it's been here, but now they have access to it, to access our phone, to use us, to pull us out of lawful things that folks are doing in this country, some of them here lawfully, to find them and send them back.
Yeah.
It is not just something that I never thought would happen in this country, but it is a true violation of our civil liberties.
And it's a question of, like, where was that line drawn? If it's going to be used for immigration status, what if I speak about the president or other policies? Am I going to become a target too?
That's
or
right.
where I feel this line gets grayer and grayer, and what it's resulting is more people are speaking out, but they're going after more and more people as well.
Yeah. Last question on this issue before we switch to the next one, but you know, we talk often about economics here in the city, the city's budget issues. You know, many employers, schools, hospitals, restaurants, construction firms, and manufacturers really depend heavily on immigrant workers. What would you say are some of the economic consequences that this increased enforcement could have for our city's workforce and our local economy?
Well, you're killing the tax base. But let's be intentional about understanding that this has always been the playbook. In Project 2025, this was actually defined. We started to displace workers from other areas to move them into some of these jobs that they're opening up or trying not to fill by moving immigrants from the country. And so it's going to harm not just homes, housing, people working. It is eviscerating the tax base here.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, so of course, per usual, not much time left, but at the top of the segment, I talked about Congressman Garcia choosing his chief of staff as his next successor, but he spent built much of his political identity around expanding Democratic participation. What does this controversy do to that reputation and that public image that he worked so hard to build?
I mean, I'm frustrated. I think we're seeing, in all of our conversations, we're seeing less and less transparency from those that were choosing to represent us in the halls of power. And whether this was intentional or not, the perception is that he handpicked his successor and didn't let democracy do its work, which is very problematic.
So speaking of perception, Jeffrey, Do you think this controversy could energize his opponents by reinforcing that this perception that incumbents benefit from a system stacked in their favor?
Yeah, I mean, perception is reality in politics, and when you've built your whole career on transparency and increasing participation, you're going to be held to your own standard.
Absolutely.
So yeah, opponents will rise up and hold him to his own standard, unfortunately or not.
And at the end of the day, the voters remain frustrated.
Exactly.
Yep. Well, per usual, great conversation with the three of you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
On the other side of the break, Chicago mayoral candidate Dr. Lisa Nee sits one-on-one with Glenn. Stay with us.
Got something to say about Chicago? Now's your chance to be heard. Chicago Newsroom 2.0 is launching Opinion, a new segment where everyday Chicagoans take the mic. Whether it's a neighborhood issue that's been ignored, a citywide concern that needs attention, or a fresh idea that could change our city, we want to hear from you. Submit your commentary at cantv.org/opinion. If selected, we'll invite you on air to share your perspective with all of Chicago. Experience the power of community television.
Our next guest is entering the race to lead America's third largest city with a message centered on accountability, public service, and restoring trust in government. Dr. Lisa Nee is an interventional cardiologist, former intensive care nurse, healthcare executive, and whistleblower whose work exposing patient failures at the Hines VA Hospital brought national attention to issues of transparency and leadership in one of our nation's largest public healthcare systems. Now, she's taken that same reform-minded message to the campaign trail after announcing her candidacy for mayor of Chicago. As voters begin evaluating what they want from the city's next leader, Dr. Nee is joining a growing field of candidates making the case that Chicago needs a new direction, one that addresses public safety, fiscal responsibility, economic opportunity, and renewed confidence in City Hall. Dr. Lisa Nee, welcome to the
Thank you so
newsroom.
much.
We're
It's
happy
lovely
to
to
have
be
you
here.
here.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. We're going to jump straight into
Okay.
this. So, your campaign is built around the idea that Chicago needs more accountability and honest leadership.
Absolutely.
Just about every other candidate has echoed those same words, but what does that mean for a potential Nee administration?
I think for someone who came from a healthcare background, you take an oath, right? The oath we take is first do no harm. And your job, no matter who else is around you or who you agree or disagree with, is to focus on the patient. For me, that would be the same focus on the citizens of the city. My job is to represent everyone, no matter what their opinion is. They can like me, they can disagree with me, but my job is to represent them to the best of my ability, be transparent in those decisions, and work with all the stakeholders that are going to be at the table to make sure those decisions are best for the people in the city.
You know, in a sea of potential candidates and candidates that have already come out to announce that they're running for mayor, that are seasoned politicians and long-term and time public officials, you've spent your career diagnosing complex medical problems and leading in healthcare and not elected office. So why should Chicagoans view that as an advantage versus a liability, especially when governing requires building political coalitions and navigating an increasingly powerful city council?
Well, I think my job is to work with the city council, right? They're very valued. They have been in there. They're representing their constituents. But someone who's a healthcare worker navigates not only complex decision-making for the patient, but it's all about affordability for patients. It's all about social determinants of health. You're navigating many different avenues to get what's best for patient. I also have an inside track into what it takes to take on the federal government and actually get something positive pulled through. That takes transparency, honesty, data, and the ability to work with everybody across the aisle, right? That was a bipartisan bill that was passed at the federal level.
So, you know, one of the things that you describe that really is shocking me in my toes, if you will, is that you describe the city's finances as being in cardiac arrest.
And I stand by that.
Very strong. And so if you do become mayor, what are the first 3 decisions, particularly financial decisions, would you make to help stabilize Chicago without adding additional burden to the taxpayers?
Well, I think financially, I don't have access to the books. I mean, I know we're in a big budget problem, but the decisions that need to be made are very complex. And so working with the people that have looked into this, growing the city, I think would be really important, generating revenue and making sure we're retaining the people that are here, right? We don't want those people to leave. You know, we've had Ernst & Young look at this, we've had a budget tax group look at this. Everybody says the same thing: cut costs, increase revenue, fix the pension. Those are three huge problems. I think what people want to know is not only are you going to look at that, but how are you looking at that differently? How are you coming in and putting together the best transition team, the brightest minds, and saying, how are we going to do things with integrity, innovation, and intent? I think the worst thing you can do is overpromise and underdeliver to people, right? So what you say you're going to do from up front, you have to be intent that you can pull that through.
Absolutely. So your experience as a whistleblower at the Hines VA Hospital demonstrated a willingness to challenge very powerful institutions. And so even at a personal toll and cost, how has that experience shaped the kind of mayor you believe that Chicago needs? And more importantly, what are some of those lessons would you bring back to City Hall?
I mean, what happened at Hines was a direct example of poor leadership, right? It's not that Hines was a bad place. It's not that the people working there didn't do their job. It was the leadership that was allowing things to happen and not course correcting so they could retain power. We see this time and time again. It's not the fault of the system. People are going to respond to the systems they're placed in. If you have bad leadership, people are unable to stand up to that out of fear. Sometimes, for me, it wasn't a matter of being fearful. It was a matter, I know what I'm doing is right. I'm protecting the patients, I'm protecting the veterans, and I will see this through. And that's exactly what I would bring to City Hall. You have to have almost, you welcome like a really good inspector general if you're doing the right thing and have the right system. It should be mildly adversarial, but they are also the watchdogs, and you should be working closely with them.
My next question, and probably our final question, Chicago is one of the most segregated cities in America. Half of the city doesn't know what the other half of the city looks like.
Correct.
So what would your administration do to truly unify our city? Because at the end of the day, many can argue that we're losing out on potential growth and competitiveness from a global standpoint. And what are those outcomes? What would that look like?
Well, I think we are not, maximizing our diversity, right? Diversity, time and time again, every study has proven if you build teams that are diverse, not only in background, but also diversity of thought, you will have greater economic growth and outcomes. We see this in corporate America, we see it in universities, and we should be seeing it here. We have such a talent pool here. We have a phenomenal city that has so many great assets. That should be unified together to make sure people are leaning in, getting the opportunities they deserve, and retaining, right? We're losing talent, we're losing people, we're losing a tax base. You want them to stay here.
Well, Dr. Nee, thank you so much for your time, and good luck on your campaign.
Thank you for having me. This was wonderful.
My pleasure. On the other side of the break, the CEO of The Stories of Us joins Suzet to discuss the power of civic imagination and storytelling. Stay with us.
They say television is about sitting back. We say it's about stepping up. Your block has stories worth telling. Your neighbors have voices worth hearing. Chicago has a heartbeat worth sharing. Stop watching their world. Start showing yours. It's time to tune in and be seen. Can TV, always here, always yours. Experience the power of community television.
Every community has stories that deserve to be told. Not just the headlines that dominate the news cycle, but the deeply personal stories that preserve culture, strengthen identity, and remind us of our shared humanity. In a city as rich and diverse as Chicago, those stories are invaluable. That's the mission behind The Stories of Us, an organization dedicated to capturing and celebrating the lived experiences of individuals and communities whose voices have too often been overlooked. Through storytelling, public engagement, and creative collaboration, the organization is working to ensure that history isn't simply recorded. It is experienced, understood, and passed on to future generations. Joining me now is the organization's co-founder and CEO, Ashley Shaw Scott Adjaye, whose vision continues to expand how storytelling can serve as a catalyst for connection, understanding, and lasting social impact. Ashley, welcome to Chicago Newsroom 2.0. It's great to have you today.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, why don't we jump right in, because I'm so curious and I really just want to start at the beginning. So what is The Stories of Us and what prompted you to launch this project?
So The Stories of Us is a civic imagination and storytelling nonprofit. We're interested in exploring public space and digital space to tell our stories and create a sense of belonging. So we do that in three ways: our talking drum public art sculptures, the programming we do with local organizations, and then also our bilingual speech to storytelling platform. And so I should mention that the talking drum itself is a really powerful symbol. It is a West African drum, and it has the tonality of a human voice and is used to share messages from one village to the next. And we love that spirit. So that's really what we're doing as we are a traveling and expanding exhibition.
Wow. Well, that's a perfect segue into my second question. Your work has really reached more than 1.7 million people in cities like Detroit, Cleveland, New Orleans, Atlanta, and New York. So share with us today what lessons you've learned from those communities that you're bringing to Chicago, and how might Chicago's story be different?
The stories we have heard across the country have been incredible, truly heartwarming and extraordinarily generous stories that people are telling. And what's interesting is that regardless of where they are in the nation, we are finding these universal themes of resilience, of joy, of hope, of loss, of care. And so that's been fascinating, that really we're not so different as maybe we think we might be, that our stories have this clear through lines. Now, what's interesting about Chicago is that we're finding a really remarkable neighborhood identity that's coming through the stories. So still we have a very strong through line of universal themes with these clear points of specific neighborhood stories.
Well, I must say, it strikes me now, and I should have asked this earlier in our conversation, but what would you say really inspired you to start The Stories of Us and to have it be a traveling mechanism or modality, if you will?
So we were thinking when we started in 2023 about 2026 coming up, and that being the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence.
Okay.
And what that was going to mean for this country as we look at the past 250 years, especially with this document that talks about equality and solidarity. The document begins with we, right? We hold these truths. So that really inspired us to do this work. Now, we wanted to make sure that this was inclusive and that we were inviting people into this idea of civic imagination, which I should say more about. It's really the idea of what you want your community, your city, your country to look like, to be like, and what is your role in that? How do you imagine what it is you want? And we've moved towards this idea of civic identity and civic imagination rather than civic duty. Because I think a lot of people are questioning, well, why do I have a duty to a place that's not necessarily fulfilling its duty to me.
Sure.
And so shifting away from that dynamic, we're really interested in, okay, let's just imagine, let's just think, what is it that we want? And as we think about what we want, we can move towards what that actually is.
That's fantastic. Well, Ashley, I can tell you that here at CAN TV, we're really excited to have the stories of us come to Chicago. We're excited about the projects that you're going to bring here and the opportunity for Chicagoans to participate. So please tell us when we can expect you to arrive in town, and how can our listeners find out more information in terms of participating?
Yes, so you can participate right now. We have just wrapped our initial launch in Fiesta del Sol in the Pilsen neighborhood. And there we featured our 5 Chicago-based sculptures that we commissioned. And so those include artists like Debbie Wong, also known as Beetlebog, Pugs Adams, Scent Rock, Kaylin Andrade, and Xavier Lewis. And so now those 5 sculptures are going to 3 other parts of the city. So we will have those 5 plus 20 from previous exhibitions in our other cities coming together in Navy Pier, in Douglas Park in North Lawndale, and at the Inglewood Arts Collective Sculpture Park. And that's on 63rd and May. We would love for people to start sharing their stories now. We have quite a few stories that came out of the Fiesta del Sol experience, but we have many more. We partnered with Inglewood Arts Collective, with Pilsen Neighbors Community Council, and we have more upcoming announcements about other storytelling partners that we have. So join the movement.
Fantastic. Well, Ashley, thank you so much for joining us today. Best of luck with your projects and activations here in Chicago. We look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Back now to share his thoughts on Howard University's decision to disenroll more than 500 incoming first-year students is Chicago Scholar CEO Jeffery Beckham.
More than 500 incoming Howard University freshmen were disenrolled 2 weeks before move-in over past due account balances, many tied to financial aid still in process. The university has since reinstated a small number of them. Most are still out. This isn't a billing problem. This is a broken promise to the exact kids Howard was built to serve. I run an organization that gets thousands of first-generation students into college and through it. I have a student living this right now, someone who overcame more than most people will ever have to just get accepted. And a number on a spreadsheet might take it all away from her. Here's what makes this difficult. HBCUs exist because the traditional college system was never built for kids who come from low-income communities. Howard exists because Black students needed a door that other institutions kept locked. That is the entire premise of the institution. So when an incoming freshman is one missed deadline away from losing their seat, that's not access. That's a different obstacle course wearing the same colors. First-generation students and students from low-income communities don't fail because they're not capable. They fail because the systems around them were never built with them in mind. Howard, of all places, should know better. We don't need institutions that replicate the same barriers. We need ones founded to tear them down to actually do it. I'm Jeffery Beckham, and that's my opinion.
We want to hear from you, Chicago. Got an opinion on a topic you've been wanting to get off your chest? CAN TV is the place to do it.
Share your opinion with us in 250 words or less. If your submission is selected, we'll invite you to join us on the air to present your perspective to the entire city.
With that, we bring this week's Newsroom to a close. As always, Chicago, thank you for making time for Chicago Newsroom 2.0 and CAN TV in your busy day.
Until we see you again, be well and well informed.